The Loser by Thomas Bernhard. It's a 1983 novel that tells of the fictional friendship with the two main characters. The narrator, who's left unnamed, but it's from his point of view, so you get a first person, just like very generously divulging on all, these different happenings and depressions and like doubts and insecurities abound throughout this novel, and it's basically told by him and his good friend Wertherheimer, who's depressive, and the subject of suicide actually makes up a good portion of the novel, like the guilt of it, the passing of having one of your best friends, commit suicide, like the tragedy of the human spirit, and genius, the staggering genius of Glenn Gould, who they are infatuated by, but they're good friends with, both of them are. And the loser, or in German, I think it's I have it written down here, Der Untergeber. I've heard other people say that there's actually a more kind of bleaker look into the word loser. German, the epithet that Germany has for it is actually kind of, well, it's Austrian, I'm sorry. It's published in German, but it's, Thomas Bernhard's actually Austrian, he's born there, and he has ups and downs, and he's like quite kind of, I wouldn't say he loathes his own country, but he definitely has a lot of kind of negative kind of critiques about the country, about like certain things, and like how he had to deal with like certain thing. I don't know. In the afterward, they mentioned that he had to kind of deal with quite old, like contemptuous old people that didn't really like his style, that didn't really like that kind of stream of conscious, kind of simmering, very brooding style, I guess. It's a little bit reminiscent of like Emil Cioran a little bit. Definitely, it's kind of hard to get through in some points, because he really does go into the whole guilt-ridden trauma side of all this, and leaves not he doesn't leave a lot behind. He's no stone is left unturned when it's like furrowing or talking about that kind of stuff. It's basically, the loser is about these three men who have a fictional relationship with Glenn Gould. Obviously, Glenn Gould's a real person. I came to Glenn Gould's kind of attention. He showed up on my radar probably at least just by virtue of the fact that I also play music, but I don't really think of myself as, which kind of led me to this novel, because I like to think that I'm musical, but I don't really. I feel like after reading this, or just not just this, but like just after hearing or listening to any of the real life Goldberg variations, not just Glenn Gould's amazing version, but in general, just Bach's that counterpart, that strong multi-voice, excuse my phone, so many different voices and melodies transposing, interweaving effortlessly, and how to actually play that in on piano is or any instrument for that matter, but I do like to fiddle around with the piano, but mostly in kind of a less traditional, kind of less Baroque, but I still occasionally like to draw a little bit, from Bach, or trying to learn his preludes, and to the Well-Tempered Clavier. That's the only thing I can really play by him, is that, and maybe partially a horrible fugue in maybe one chorale, the one that you hear, the one in that was also made to part as a theme for Solaris, I think, was the not Stalker but Solaris, Tarkovsky, and by, I think, I'm blanking on his name. I think it's Alexei Klimov, I think. But yeah, this but I do have a good affinity. I have I grew up with classical music in the background, in the periphery. That and the Romantics, I grew up listening to having, not much Bela Bartok, not much of the modernist either. I don't remember really hearing. I remember hearing Stravinsky, probably even the Rite of Spring kind of transition when he went from Russia, and stopped kind of with stuff like, I think he had one, what was it called, like Mary, I think, or he had a Maria or something. He had like an opera that was very in the traditional kind of maybe more romantic kind of way, but then in Rite of Spring he was focusing more on kind of like textures and like the dun, 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 the kind of visceral element of music that was more different, that was like less kind of following or abiding in the code of conduct of what they thought to be strictures of Bach or maybe Handel or all these different people that. So that's kind of, but then this kind of brings me to Glenn Gould, because he was an interesting character of somebody who's so well versed in playing all this stuff in like new Bach inside and out. But he also had a soft spot, I think, for like Dixieland jazz as well, I'm told. And he also had, it is true, he did die at the age of 50, but not from suicide. As that he was quite a interesting character, because he was like an iconoclastic almost recluse at times in his career, where he would just buy this house out in his hometown of Canada. He was Canadian, I think actually a Canadian American, and he actually changed his name, I think, to avoid, I think it was actually Goulding or Gould, or I think it was Gold, I think. But despite not being Jewish, like his parents actually just changed it just because of the anti-Semitism that was kind of rampant in, surprisingly enough, like in Canada too, I think suffered from. There was kind of a world Red Scare going on, I think, and that happened in the 30s too. So I guess like that was kind of in order to kind of avoid all the hate mongering. He basically his father changed his name. So I think he joked that he was like, I was Jewish before the war or something like that. But anyway, so yeah, Glenn Gould, yeah, he's an interesting character because he was, at times he could be very, like immersing himself in his art, and he would hum great melodies. He had perfect pitch that he developed like age 3, 4, just something really ridiculous amount of talent, just brimming. And his parents were musical too, and they kind of fostered this growth. And from an early age, he was just very very virtuosic. And these two people kind of are led into his circle and are like in his corner. And then he calls Wertheimer kind of like in a ironic, cynical tone, loser. Like he's like, oh, the loser, which is biting, but it's like it's not like Glenn Gould was like trying to be malicious or, trying to, but it was a kind of subtle kind of way of saying like, hey, it's, it's okay if you're not, at my level, because his level is so like out of bounds, like you'd have to. And there was something, like a self-sacrificial aspect. There's like an almost weird monkish asceticism to it, like the withdrawing yourself from society, like Gould did for a time, but also kind of he came back into it and like played in halls and sold out, not stadiums, but like great big conservative, like music halls and all throughout the world pretty much. And that is like he had a good deal of like kind of charm to him too, like a kind of offbeat charm, and he was like very, very like emphatically just like witty and like just passionate about music, just like the history of it, like the circumstances and context to like what bred Bach or to them to make what they did, like counterpart stuff, and or like his Lutheran phase with like the St. Matthew's Passion and stuff like that. I've got to read more about Gould, obviously, but this is less about the facts. And the only thing is that the only real fact is that Glenn Gould died a year before this was published. So, and then Bernhard, just to kind of get this out of the way, passed away due to a inflamed lung, I think. Some kind of there's a name for it. I'm missing out. I'm not too good with my medical terms, but yeah, he died of an inflamed lung that took his life at the age of 58, I think. So yeah, who knows what else he could have taken from this. I know this is my only Bernhard novel that I've actually read so far, and it's a quick read, but I was also trying to juggle as more or less of an experiment that's probably not going to really extend or really last or stick all that long, but of just reading like 4 or 5 books at once, I think, and I've been kind of taking this slowly. So, but yeah, the topic of suicide in response to kind of on Wertheimer, because they get from like they all meet at the Mozarteum, I think, the Mozarteum in Salzburg, and it's a musical conservatory for kind of gifted people. And Bernhard himself actually went to a musical school, I think, but he didn't follow through. I think he left. I think because he was and this might be partially autobiographical in that sense. And they basically are all outshined and outclassed by Gould, who's completely. He plays they all have kind of hopes that it's yeah, maybe I'm gonna be a pretty good piano player someday. I'm gonna be a pianist in concert halls and all that. And then what happens is they hear Gould playing the Goldberg variations, and they're just completely awestruck, And this is all happening when Gould is in his early 20s, I think, or maybe late teens, and they're just completely okay, yeah, we are not anything like that. We're never gonna get that good, the down to the very minute intricacies, and to the everything he does is completely uniquely his own too, but at the same time he's and if you ever look at anything to do with classical pieces, there's just so much going on, so many different layers, and to be able to, and then I can't read sheet music, but the way the treble clef and the bass clef, and not just that, but and then time signatures, those are very basic indications, and they're very signs, it's all on paper to the exact degree of how you should play. Kind of Isabelle Huppert and the piano teacher, which is very great, but also very depressing film. One of my favorites. So, Michael Haneke is Austrian too. So, but yeah, no doubt, probably one of my favorites. But anyway, so yeah, but then Wertheimer goes through. They both go through kind of not suicidal, but depressive tendencies, and Wertheimer has a sister. She's kind of a religious fanatic in some sense, I think, and she's also a little bit controlling, and they have a weird kind of the way that the narrator describes it is kind of implying that it's weird pseudo-incestuous, I think, and I'm not sure to what degree that's just kind of the narrator, because the narrator is also kind of I'm not gonna lie, he's kind of a douchebag. He's kind of an asshole towards everybody in this, and then that's why he feels such guilt, is because Wertheimer, spoiler alert, but he ends up hanging himself in front of his sister's house in this weird kind of almost spite, in a way to both insult her, but it's also in a weird humiliation type of way of showing hey, this is how I'm going out, it's a gesture, it's is weirdly kind of humiliating and embarrassing, and that's how he reads it, the narrator, and the narrator being obviously a good friend of Wertheimer, feels pretty bad that he didn't take further action and didn't do all in his, even within a mild capacity to help out one of his best friends, overcome these very depressive episodes, and it ended tragically, and now he's feeling horrible about it, and he's so that's why you get this kind of stream of consciousness kind of way that actually, weirdly enough, it actually reminded me a bit of Jose Saramago's, although I should say this predates this for a good 15 years, I think. Blindness, because he goes through the way he there's no chapter breaks in this either, right? So basically, if you're reading this, it's basically one big unending paragraph. In that sense, it's kind of postmodern too, because there's a lot of kind of just off the cuff kind of ramblings that the narrator goes through, and he goes off and about things about how much he hates kind of Austria, or the Switzerland kind of area, where that kind of where it's kind of the nexus, kind of where France, European, which I don't know, because the only impression that I got when I went to Switzerland, when I visited, just kind of briefly, kind of passing through when I was trekking around France, was just peaceful. The air was just very clean. You could hike in the mountains freely. Nobody really cared what you did. They were just very peaceful and very peaceful people. But maybe there's a a darker side that I'm not seeing. There's I think I maybe just from the outside looking in, it's not. I don't quite understand what exactly he he had against kind of Swiss, Germany / Austria and all that. But I haven't visited Austria yet, so I would like to definitely visit. Vienna obviously is kind of a no doubter, no brainer. But I would like to definitely. But yeah, with going back to the narrator, it also has a really soft spot for the Portugal too. Like he finally, that's like the happiest part of the novel, is like when he's like gets away from all the virtuosos and the music's the music conservatories and the endless like that virtuoso lifestyle of being in front of the public and having to perform nervously in front of stage. In that sense, that would have probably been something Glenn Gould himself would have been in reality would actually I think said he didn't like performing live either, and he would get like really nervous as well. So there's a very human-like element to it too, of like the overarching kind of theme of us all being shared this kind of anxiety of like performing and trying to put on an image of perfection and flawlessness and decorum for the sake of everybody. And it's like kind of performing in like what it was, Victor Borge kind of that kind of coattail suit with the long kind of it's been a while since I've seen Victor Borge, but yeah, this is a pretty interesting comedian, but pianist as well. Anyway, so yeah, there's this. He goes away to Portugal in like Lisbon, I think, and then talks about how much happier and better off he is there, and then hears about the death of his friend. And then early on, there's kind of an augury about suicide when he talks about this place I would go on called Monk's Mountain, and he would say that they would all. That it was an actual popular destination. I'm not sure how true this is. Maybe it's a bending of kind of the facts of like what actually happened, but he was saying that on this Monk's Mountain, people would go up in elevator to the very top of the tower on top of the mountain, I think, and then they'd throw themselves off. And then you would see their remains on there, and I have a little excerpt from that I'd like to read because it's like kind of highlights, I think, the... So he says... This is kind of early on in the novel. I think the first chapter, second. The whole time on my way to the teacher's, I kept on saying these three words: absolutely no artist. Absolutely no artist. If I hadn't met Glenn Gould, I probably wouldn't have given up on the piano, and I would have become a piano virtuoso and possibly, or even one of the best piano virtuos in the world. I thought in that inn. When we meet the very best, we have to give up, I thought. Strangely enough, I met Glenn on Monk's Mountain, my childhood mountain. Of course, I had seen him previously at the Mozarteum, but he hadn't exchanged a word with him before meeting him on Monk's Mountain, which is also called Suicide Mountain, which, since it's especially suited for suicide, and every week at least 3 to 4 people throw themselves off into the void. The prospective suicides ride the elevator inside the mountain to the top, take a few steps, and hurl themselves off to the city below. Their smashed remains on the street have always fascinated me, and I personally like Wertheimer, by the way. Oops. Lost my place. Okay, so he often climbed the ridden elevator at the top of the Monk's Mountain with the intention of hurling myself into the void, but didn't throw myself off, nor did Wertheimer. So he just kind of like says, that as kind of like this kind of ironic kind of wry way of saying like, well, I guess, after seeing Glenn Gould play, it's like this is the only other option. And like the number is so staggeringly high of like 3 to 4 people every week. Just sounds like it's like completely. Hopefully that's not like actually happening. I hope not. I do know there's some countries where some, I guess, north of the equator where they get less sunlight, and like Greenland, for example, I think suicide rates I've heard are pretty high, but it might just be kind of an urban legend. Anyway, so yeah, in response to this, both characters try to actually pursue different occupations and crafts. One such with the being for the narrator to be a philosophy, good to get into philosophy, but he never quite gets there. And it's interesting that you're seeing this kind of text of like, it's kind of philosophical in nature of like talking about certain aspects of greatness and genius and all that, but at the same time it's like told through this kind of person who's like looking or like kind of window shopping at lifestyles. He's like, well, maybe I should just do philosophy, because I think Glenn Gould himself also said that he would have been a writer had he not been a pianist. So, but yeah, that, and then Wertheimer, they both, I think Wertheimer also hints at a career in like letters or like writing, and like basically like it's insinuated that he actually doesn't write all that much, but it's like he doesn't actually write like a kind of a book or like a novel per se, but he does write a lot of like intermittent little scripts or like kind of like pieces of paper, like note paper, and then he has like thousands of like pages of this stuff I think discovered in his apartment after he commits suicide. And yeah, it just like it adds up, and it's like very like there is like a genius to him, but not in the same capacity of like Glenn Gould. And you have to kind of choose your battles, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, that's kind of something that we're all learning, but I myself too, as I grow older and older, I notice that I can't juggle this many things. Like I can't play a decent, or I can't play economically great or profoundly good guitar, and I can't play really, really, really great piano, and I can't play a little bit of banjo or ukulele or whatever else I have, and bass guitar, and try to juggle stuff on the virtual instrument side of things, and I can't also juggle that with doing this thing and wanting to record these things, which are fun. It's not like I put like my all into recording these things. I mean, I do try to make it like I'm reading the stuff like the material, but it's also stuff that's like it's not really. I don't feel like I have to try to exert myself to read the stuff. It's more of a reflexive territory of like just like making reading like a lifestyle habit. I know that sounds kind of a influencer kind of word, like lifestyle habit, whatever. But there is truth to that. I think there's like I think genius is partially some of it is chaotic. Some people do. I mean, I definitely don't agree with the whole Mark Wahlberg, the gambler thing, where he's saying like in the scene, like it's like I don't know if it's like a viral. I think it's a kind of viral video, but it's like it's actually a take on the that's so much of a book nerd I am. It's like a take on the Dostoevsky novel, The Gambler, which is like way different. It's just like totally different because I haven't seen the movie The Gambler, but like in the 2014 version, there's basically. It's not even like comparable to the 70s version with Kenny Rogers, I think. So it's that at least had a southern charm kind of thing going on, but like with this one it's just kind of like Marky Mark's like a professor, and he's like, you shouldn't even be like he's a literature professor, and he's like, I wrote novels, and it's like a novelist is a career that died out 100 years ago, like you want something about Hamlet, like the Earl of Oxford and Shakespeare are the same people, but why, like, what idiot, like, wouldn't want to put their name on Hamlet and be, like, like, completely, shrouded, or, completely, would want to shroud themselves in mystery, like, and not just accept, like, take the win on that, or whatever. It's just, like, because some writers don't really want to have all that much. It's, like, he's equating genius with this all-out thing that it's, like, you either have it or you don't, and if you don't have it, don't even bother trying, just give up. And I get that his character is supposed to be flawed and stuff, but, like, still, it's just kind of like, is that really all there is to it? Like, you can't at least try to kind of cultivate genius? And, like, I mean, for example, like, I'm not good at languages and stuff, but, like, it's not just because I'm not out there, like, speaking Mandarin after 3 weeks of learning, it doesn't mean that I can't try. It's, like, I think that kind of puts a kind of, like a stopper, or like a, it just completely just, like, puts the reins and takes away, strangles out kind of, like, the life and the complexity of things, that things aren't black and white genius. And I think maybe that's a bit of the misconception I think people have, is that it's this unhealthy thing of, like, well, you've got to just be an asshole to everybody, because that's what geniuses do. It's like, right, House MD, like him, like, walking in and being like, oh, I'm completely can't read the room, but he can, but he can read the room, but he just doesn't give a crap. That kind of attitude of just, like, like, completely alienating people. And it's like, but hey, we're also pointing out the limitations of genius, right? I don't like that, because it's like, there are people that are nice and kind towards people, and geniuses, and, like, just completely, there's, I think it takes a certain aspect of mindfulness and like gratitude and love towards others that isn't this overnight thing. It's like it kind of takes time. Like genius, like it's I think there's like a balance and like a hierarchy of different things, not just in the kind of classic psychological way of Maslow's hierarchy, but just in a general hierarchy of balance. Like just like if you are 100% genius and you never go outside and feel the fresh air or like take a hike or challenge yourself, physically, even just like feeling the asphalt of your town or your hometown, or just walking around on the side of the road, like if you can't do like even if that, like then what's the point? I think because if you exhaust yourself and if you and that's why it's like so often you hear about geniuses or like in the throes of like losing their minds over stuff. Like it's like that's why Nietzsche was so big on just like, hey, like sure, some of it was like maybe a personal kind of enlightened, like he felt like he was like things were coming together and things were making sense in a way that didn't before. And like when he was in Turin with a horse and he like lost his mind, but it also was like a syphilis kind of thing, like I guess kind of fomented in that system for so long that it kind of went to his head immediately and kind of like made things haywire. But I think that his whole idea of like going out and feeling like the fresh air of like Sils Switzerland, and which I would have loved to have gone, but it was like the 4 hours on the other side of Switzerland, and I was like not sure if I can make it in time and make my flight back in time, so excuses. But anyway, but yeah, it's like I heard it's like just completely beautiful, just countryside, and just like getting out there, like he said, like the something to do with like the salubrious nature of philosophy. It's a healing thing. It's like that's why hiking with Nietzsche I'd like to review sometimes. Pretty good take on that, I think, despite having some faults with the John Cagg, I think is the author, and yeah, he talks about that whole idea of like the sickness of like Nietzsche and how he's trying to just kind of like he was trying to kind of like distance himself in middle age from like people that he found toxic, like Vihard Wagner and like all these people that were just going down these boring, that he found to be kind of just boring infatuations with like Christian mysticism. And he was like, just screw all that, I'm just gonna go out here and be on my lonesome and then write hours for 3 hours every morning and then go on huge hikes before the sun even rises or something. I can't remember, but yeah, he's that's not for everybody though. I mean, it's not, no. I mean, I'm not naturally like an early riser. I'm not as but I do like to challenge myself in some ways. We got off track here. Anyway, but yeah, this there's one more thing I'd like to say about the loser is that he said this very interesting term, like the deterioration process, I think, of when when they finally realized that they didn't have the mass amount of expansive talent that Glenn had. They basically like chose their like little their the term for it was like deterioration, and like how to and like what they used as kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to call myself a philosopher, I'm going to call myself a man of letters, but like really it's just like our little complicit way of saying that we're deteriorating as people, that we actually still hold a grudge against that of never being as good as Gould. So I just thought that was kind of funny, darkly funny. I mean, it's not for everybody. I mean, there were times in this novel when I felt like kind of giving up a little bit, just because of there was. I mean, it ends with in an interesting way, since I spoiled enough of it already. Ends with a little bit of him going back to the piano, kind of approaching it in a new light, and not really, but like to. This saves the loser from being merely an exercise in verbal wit, caricature, and self-mockery. Here we have Bach's music, Gould's artistic dedication, and finally the narrator's confession of love. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not that. That's the afterword. But anyway, there's a. So there was one thing I missed at the end of the loser, because I was going to just read that final little paragraph, but the camera died. which is kind of surprising because it was like the battery was perfectly fine, but like it didn't do what I normally expected it to do, which is to like once it's done, if it goes past the 20-minute mark, it automatically starts a new thing, and it's just, you know, it prompts, you know, jumps on right onto the new thing. So it's not something I should keep checking, but you know, it decided to die on me either way. So but basically there's not much. There's only like 2 to 3 minutes of footage. So anyway, so the end of Thomas Bernhard's at the end of The Loser, I just thought it was an interesting way that he segues, I mean not segues, but just kind of leaves things kind of up in the air a little bit. Like you're not really sure what's become of the narrator, and you know, especially with the guilt that he felt about Wertheimer's suicide. And so this is it. The deliverymen weren't out the door, said Franz, before Wertheimer sat down at the piano and began playing. It was awful, said Franz. Franz, had thought his master had lost his mind, but Franz, hadn't wanted to believe in Wertheimer's insanity and hadn't taken to it nonetheless the curious behavior of Wertheimer. His master, seriously, if I had any interest in the matter, Franz said to me, he would describe it to me the days and the weeks that had taken place in Drake. I asked Franz to leave me alone in Wertheimer's room for a while to put on Glenn's Goldberg Variations, which I had seen lying on Wertheimer's record player, which is still open. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, and then there's something else I added there, but that might have got cut out. I'm not sure. Where I was talking about this kind of misconception surrounding genius, and that genius is something you either have in spades and just like completely overtly, or you don't have it at all. And if it's the latter, you shouldn't try at all whatsoever to become a genius. And I think that's kind of dangerous mentality, because genius is, I think, a lot more ambiguous than that. I think there's so much you can offer to the world, even if you're a mediocre, you know, like guitar player like me, or because I think it's better to be kind of, rather than overestimating and being like, yeah, I know for a fact I'm really, really, really good. If you do, then I guess there's no point. I mean, like, I guess if you look at one interview I watched a while back, or part of it, with Vladimir Horowitz, the pianist, said, which funnily enough, I think they said Horowitz. I don't know if it's the same Horowitz. I'm not totally up to date with all the different, I know like, maybe a few different pianists by name or whatever, but yeah. But yeah, he said something to the effect of like he knew he was the greatest. Like that's why he was like, yes, because I'm the best. That's why they, you know, he said like kind of a Russian Slavic accent. It was kind of funny, but yeah, he was like, he knew directly that he was the best. That's why they got him to play, because there's this, you know, idea that if you don't own up to it, or if you're not like really confident in your abilities, it's different, I think, with piano, because it's like you have to kind of, you know, pour over it for hours and hours to like reading sheet music and perfecting everything. And there's also, but I think in this modern day, you know, like it's like my thing is like spreading myself too thin. I know what I'm trying to do. Part of me wants to do music, and then part of me wants to keep up on filmmaking stuff, or, you know, or even make like a short film myself. I've been teasing that idea for a little while, of just like a self-filmed kind of student almost film project. Not that I actually am a official student anywhere, or was at any university or anything, but just that kind of idea of just taking it, or like a beginner's mindset of just approaching it like a student, I guess, and just trying to play around with camera angles and 180 degree rules and stuff, which I don't really know how I do unless, you know, I have another person, and that's, you know, the limitations of it. Whereas with music, at least, like, or I can just do all this stuff by myself and kind of wing it, which probably isn't a good way of doing it either. Like, ultimately, I think the next step is collaboration, no matter what way I look at it. And that's, to me, it's like, I feel most comfortable here, like in this room, playing, you know, whatever piano I have there, and, you know, practicing and doing little things for short durations, but, you know, really, yeah. So anyway, but The Loser, it just has this idea that I think about genius is that people just think so much that it has to be so out of this world. Like, it's like, what kind of, person wouldn't put their name on, Hamlet? Like, so that's why the whole, what was he talking about? Like the Earl of Oxford, kind of one of the theories, I guess, of history that have been boggling some people is that, Shakespeare was actually the Earl of Oxford or something to the effect, or, and, but yeah, I'm not really sure what to think about that, but it's just this idea that, like, if you don't have a scrap of talent and you don't have that ability, don't even bother coming to class. Like that movie The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, I just thought was like a little bit, there's lines between, there's like different ways you can look at talent, and I think, because I think you scare people off too if you tell them, no, if you're not super good right away, because I was horrible. Like, I was just, obviously, anybody is. Like, the second you put a pen to paper and you start writing or drawing or doing anything, any medium of talent, you're gonna deal with this, like, not sharing how much is too strong, or, like, how much of it is, like, darn, how much of this stuff is innate stuff that just flows to you. Because in order for me to actually, because now at least I can sit down on the piano and let it flow out, if that, for what it's worth, I mean, I can at least be like, okay, well, that's a circle of fifths, or that's a major this or that, or that's, they're voicing that in fifths or harmonizing in thirds, and or the major third or the minor third and diminished chords and stuff like that. I know kind of my way around, but in order to get to that point, I actually had to just go through things of just looking like a complete idiot in my room alone on this crappy little 60 key keyboard that wasn't even like remotely adequate enough because it didn't have weighted keys. But the ultimate thing is to get like an actual ivory thing that's ivory and ebony full 88 keys, with the proper sustain pedal. Because even like this thing I have here, it's pretty realistic and stuff, but like for those, because the volume isn't up, but you probably can't hear that. But it's like even that isn't good enough, because the real piano actually has 3 pedals. It has like it's like the softener, the dampings, and then there's the kind of louder one where it's like you can actually see the piano shift depending on what you have. But yeah, it's like there's all sorts of different things, because the piano is actually considered a percussive instrument. That's how it's classified officially. Anyway, but yeah, so that is kind of my take on The Loser by Thomas Bernhard. And yeah, thanks for watching if you made it this far. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I know I never really say that, just because it's like so, it's evident, like if you're watching, like you're gonna, whatever. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.